Well, the NHL might not be going on at the moment, but that doesn't mean hockey things aren't still happening. Welcome into the DNVR Avalanche Podcast. I'm Rudo, dealing with some stuff today in real life. So it's just going to be me today, but, come have fun. Come enjoy a show. I'm going to talk about the last 45 days of Avalanche hockey. We're going to recap everything that's happened. We're going to talk about the standings. We're going to get into who's performed well and who hasn't over this last little stretch for Colorado. So why not jump in right away? I mean, let's get something obvious out of the way first. The Avs' best player over this stretch, at least production-wise, is very clearly Nathan MacKinnon. Of course, he's going to be that guy for the Avs at any given time. He's still right at the top of the NHL when it comes to production. He has 87 points this year. There are a couple things I wanted to get into on Nathan MacKinnon, though, because we've had a lot of conversations about him this year and his, call it unwillingness to shoot. I don't know what exactly you would call it, but I think there's a little bit of inaccuracy around Nathan MacKinnon shooting the puck this year. On the power play, absolutely true. He has not shot the puck enough on the power play. We actually saw it towards the end of this stretch of hockey. He started shooting it again, and wouldn't you know it, the Avs power play has gotten a lot better. But over this last stretch, since the turn of the new year, January 1st, Nathan MacKinnon ranks third in the NHL for total shots. So it's not like he's not shooting the puck at all. He is shooting the puck quite a bit. It's just mostly coming at 5-on-5 right now. And that does somewhat reflect in his production. Obviously, the Avs' long stretch of poor power play performance in January. Those two things are obviously connected, but I do think it's important to understand where Nathan MacKinnon is at this year, not just in, obviously, the ridiculous point production that he's very much the favorite in the race to win the Art Ross, but he's actually going to have to continue to perform producing and likely score goals at a higher rate to do that. Only 21 goals on the season so far for MacKinnon. So while he is producing at a ridiculous pace, that goal scoring total does need to come up for him a little bit. With 25 games left in the season, he's obviously not going to threaten 50 or anything like he did a year ago, but you'd love to see him get to realistically maybe 35 across that stretch, 35, 36. If he can give you 15 goals in the next 25 games, I think you'd feel a lot more comfortable with where he's at. And for the record, MacKinnon currently shooting 9.3% this year, which would be his lowest shooting percentage since his big breakout. He had a couple of lower shooting percentages early in his career when he hadn't really found his game yet, but that would put him at his next lowest since breaking out is a 9.7%, and that was in 2020-21 where he only played 48 games. So hopefully that shooting percentage can come up a little bit for him, but the actual shot totals aren't that low. He's well on pace to shoot well over 300 shots this year. It shouldn't be too difficult for him to get the shot totals to where it needs to be to score a whole bunch of goals. If Nathan MacKinnon can get there, hopefully the rest of the team will follow. Obviously, the Avs went through a couple of major shakeups when it does come to their lineup. We'll get to those in a minute. And yes, no three-peats in sports is probably the best for everyone, right? I'm all for that. So, and also the Chiefs losing. If you're from Denver, you're probably a fan of the Chiefs losing. I know there's a couple Chiefs fans in chat, but you have to deal with that one. Sorry, can't help you. Other guys have thrown out the possibility of Sam Bennett being on the trade block. What kind of return would that actually fetch, assuming it's true? He's having a down year, but still a gamer. That one's tough, right? Because I don't like Florida's trying to go back to back, right? Them trading Sam Bennett would be a weird choice if they're serious about trying to win again. I mean, let me actually look how his playoff performance has been in his career. Because I don't know that he's really having a down year. I guess like defensively he hasn't been any good this year, but production-wise, he's maybe not on pace for a career year, but pretty close. Like he's scoring at a pretty decent rate. His playoffs last couple of years have been really, really good too. So I get it contract wise. If Florida doesn't see a future, maybe they're looking to get assets and extend their window a little bit. But I don't know that Sam Bennett is a big enough piece to really make a massive trade. And if they're actively shopping him, like I don't know that teams are going to aggressively help Florida either, right? So it's a tough spot. P.S. If you have questions, throw them in the chat. It's just me today, so. We'll get to a bunch of topics if you guys have things you want to ask. Randy asked, Rudo, what are the odds of us getting Ryan O'Reilly? I mean, I don't think there's zero. I can't give you an actual percentage. I'll put it this way. If he's available, I think the Avs are one of the front runners. I just don't know that Nashville will make him readily available. That's the type of player that Barry Trotz is going to absolutely love. It's a guy that you build locker rooms around. He fills in so many holes in your lineup, and a better player, but Nashville would be losing essentially like an Arturi Lehkonen, if you want to think about it that way, right? That's a guy who can play up and down your lineup. That's a guy who fixes lines for you. It's a guy who can play in any situation and you trust him. So I can see where Nashville would have a really hard time moving on from that guy. I don't know if they're willing to or not. And obviously Nashville's horrible this year. If I were them, I would blow it up. I hated the Stamkos moves in the offseason. I was one of the few people who was down on them, and it's gone so poorly that if I were them, anything would be available. But we've seen teams like to stick with guys maybe when they shouldn't all the time. And of everyone in that lineup, I think Ryan O'Reilly is one of the hardest for them to let go of, especially because he has 2 more years on that deal at $4.5 million, which is not, especially with the cap going up, that is not an expensive deal. That's going to be a good value deal. Even if you see O'Reilly hit an age wall or whatever you want to talk about there, he's still going to be an effective NHL player because of his style. All right, we'll keep it moving here. Realistic top 4 D-man to go after by the deadline. I mean, there's a handful. We did a show last week. If you want to go back and watch our trade board, we talk about a ton of them. Perfect world, I think Provorov is my favorite, but realistic targets, you're probably looking at someone like a Brian Dumoulin, something like that. What is Casey worth on a trade market? See, the thing is, and people hate this answer when it comes to the trade deadline, a player is worth whatever someone's willing to give for him, right? Valuing a player isn't necessarily worth anything, because I can say I want Connor McDavid for Casey Middlestat. That's my value, and obviously that's never going to happen. So usually if teams are serious about making a trade, you end up meeting somewhere in the middle on it. And kind of the funny trading point where I make a trade realistic. If I'm unhappy with it and I think the other side would be unhappy with it, that usually means it's a pretty fair trade. So In reality, I struggle to see a trade where you're giving Casey Middlestat 1-for-1 for somebody and you're getting better. Someone like Ryan O'Reilly may be one of the few targets that you can do that with. If Nashville is looking to get younger, if they're looking for a refresh, maybe you could do Casey for Ryan O'Reilly. But I think in a lot of ways, you're selling pretty low on Casey right now. As much as I'm the guy who defends him, his trade value is not the best right now. I don't think there's any doubt about that. So it's hard to really throw that in there. See some other talk about Casey in here. I would not trade Casey for a winger. I'll put it to you that way. I have no real interest in playing Necas at center. He's been so good at wing. Even if you're thinking like, hey, let's move him away from Mackinnon so he can drive another line. Let him drive the line from wing. It's what he's done for the most part these last couple of years. He hasn't played center really in a while. You should let him play wing and put a different center around him. If you want to move Casey or whatever, fine. But I would not make more questions for yourself at center. I would put it to you that way. I think you're doing yourself a disservice because you already, like with Casey in the lineup, even if you're not replacing him at 2C, you already kind of need another center, right? You need to go out and get a 3C or a middle 6C or whatever. So solving that by saying, let's just try Necas at C, especially given the way things have gone this year. Parker Kelly hasn't really worked out as a center. You tried a couple of other guys at, let's see if they can play center, like a Parsonen in your depth, and none of them have really worked. So it's tough. It's tough right now. I don't know that the Avs are over the Middlestat experience. I will say the Avs are trying to win Stanley Cups now. Now meaning this year and the next handful of years. They're in the middle of their window. So any move that they believe makes their lineup better, they'll do. Like, this is nothing personal, right? It's just a business and they're trying to win. So if it makes them better, they should do it. I think that is pretty simple. Brayden Schenn, definitely an option. Not one of my favorite options at this point. He's another one of those guys where you worry about the age line. He's 33. Historically, we talked about this before, but historically, 32 is when you start to hit that age wall as an NHL player. The other problem there is 3 more years after this one left on that deal at $6.5 million. So 1, it's going to be really hard to get the Blues to retain. 2, you're committing to a guy until he's age 36, which is, I mean, if you truly believe he can keep it up, go for it. His production is solid this year. We've seen a little bit of a drop off in the last 2 seasons. He's not really that 60-point guy anymore. And here's the part. Why are you getting Brayden Schenn? To be your 3C or to be your 2C? Because his production this season is the exact same as Casey Middlestat's. Points-wise, identical production to Casey Middlestat. So if you're going to be mad that a guy isn't producing enough in Middlestat, Brayden Schenn doesn't solve that problem. He's the same guy. You're making a move for the sake of making a move, right? If you're getting both of them, I think you're having a conversation. You have a 2-3C combo where you probably end up with, you have a really, really good 3C and just an okay 2C. With that being said, he's $6.5 million. You can't go out and get a $6.5 million 3C. So money there and term there is a big problem for me for the Avs. I don't know. I don't see it making a ton of sense to go out and get Schenn. I'll put you that much. Anyway, we are at our first break here, so I am going to take that very quickly here as we are brought to you by the folks over at Mando. Make sure you jump in with Mando and get yourself all fresh and clean. Whatever it is, whether it's balls, butts, butt cracks, belly buttons, you name it. They've got you covered over at Mando with a bunch of great scents geared towards men like Bourbon Leather, Clover Woods, Mount Fuji, and Pro Sport. That's really hard to say. Bourbon Leather, Clover Woods. Say that 5 times fast. I can't do it. With Mando, of course, they have a ton of amazing products. You can get in with their starter pack today. It comes with 4 different products, including 2 products of your choice, like mini body wash or deodorant wipes, but also stick deodorant and cream tube deodorant, and all of that comes with free shipping. And our listeners can even get $5 off when they use code DNVR with the starter pack. They'll also get free shipping. That's about a $40 or 40% deal, rather, on the starter pack. Do it at shopmando.com. That's shopmando.com. Use that DNVR code. Support our show. Let them know we sent you over there. Smell fresher, stay drier, and boost your confidence from head to toe with Mando. Once you're smelling good, once you're feeling good, go jump in your car and enjoy life. Drive down the road in your Toyota. Visit your local Front Range Toyota dealerships and get yourself into the official vehicle of us here at DNVR. Of course, tons of vehicles to choose from, whether it be trucks, SUVs, sedans. They've got the Tundra. They've got the 4Runner. They've got the Corolla. They've got a bunch of other vehicles, too, if you're looking for something else. A bunch of hybrid vehicles, which are the types of vehicles that I'm looking at, because it turns out gas costs a lot of money, and I'm trying to save money. Toyota has some of the most hybrid vehicles out there, with 16 different hybrids to choose from, including even their trucks, like the Tundra iForce Max Hybrid. So get with them today at your local Front Range dealerships, including AutoNation Toyota, Arapahoe and Centennial, Corwin Toyota and Boulder, Groove Toyota and Littleton, Mountain State Toyota in Denver, Stevenson Toyota East in Aurora, and Stevenson Toyota West in Lakewood. Again, Toyota is the official vehicle of not just us here at DNVR, but the Colorado Avalanche, too. Toyota. Let's go places. Second period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast. I do want to talk about where the Avs sit in the standings, as everything is all set in, I call it stone, whatever you want to call it here. Everyone is at the break, and the Avs currently sit 2 points behind Minnesota, with Minnesota having 1 game in hand, 4 points behind Dallas, with Dallas having 2 games in hand. Minnesota is certainly within range. If the Avs play well, they can absolutely catch Minnesota in the last 25 games of the season. Dallas also in range, but going to be a little bit tougher. With that said, the Avs, due to a certain extent, control their own destiny for the rest of the season, at least when it comes to those two. Certainly, they're not going to catch Winnipeg. It's not going to happen. Winnipeg is just too far ahead at this point. You're not talking about the first seed in the Central or the West, really. So you can stop thinking about Winnipeg. What I will say is the Avs have pretty much put themselves in comfortable position. Obviously, you see no one behind them in the Central is really even competitive. Even if Utah wins their game in hand, that would put them 9 points back of Colorado. So no one there is going to threaten them to take away one of the wild card spots. They're currently 7 points ahead of Vancouver. Vancouver does have some games in hand, but then you look at Calgary, they're 9 points ahead with Calgary with 3 games in hand. So even if teams win all of their games in hand, the Avs would still be ahead of them in the wild card race. And those teams aren't very likely to win all of their games. Both of Vancouver and Calgary have lost more games than they've won this year. There are loser points in there, so they're actually above 500 teams, but those are not teams that are likely to really rattle off a ton of wins and chase down Colorado when it comes to the standings, with the Avs having that advantage. So at this point, I don't want to count chickens before they hatch or anything like that, but it would take something extraordinary for the Avs not to make the playoffs this season. Now, it would also take a pretty big effort from Colorado to have home ice in the first round. Again, that would have them catch both Minnesota and Dallas to have that home ice advantage. So it's possible, and they would have to go do some direct winning. You have to not only win a bunch of games, but with the few remaining games that the Avalanche have against both Dallas and Minnesota, which I'm not 100% sure how many games that is. I know there's a few, but they have to win their head-to-head matchups when it comes to those opponents. It's that simple. The most recent one being Minnesota, which comes on February 28th, which, by the way, we're taking over Ball Arena for that game. If you want to come be part of the takeover, if you want to watch what could be a big game in the standings in a suite with us, it'll be a fun time. Highly recommend you get in there. It's always a great time, not just in the arena, but we have a bus to and from the bar where you get free drinks on the bus. So everybody has a ton of fun. Highly recommend you come out, join us for that, and maybe watch the Avs get a big win against Minnesota. The Avs are usually pretty good on the takeovers. I'm not going to lie. They win the majority of them. Not all of them, but the majority of them they win. They play Minnesota one more time after that in March. They also play Dallas once in March. Obviously, they have to win other crucial games too, but if they win those 3 games, realistically, they should be in contention for certainly the 3rd seed and maybe the 2nd seed in the West. Now, you do want to have a conversation of, do you even want one of those seeds? There's a pretty good chance if you get the 3rd or 2nd seed that you end up playing Dallas here, which I get it. 4 rounds, you got to go through everybody if you're trying to do the thing. Maybe you don't care. Maybe you just want, hey, give me these teams, do what you got to do. We're gonna go through them. Maybe Dallas in the 1st round will shake up the mojo instead of Dallas in the 2nd round where the Avs just can't seem to beat them. And obviously you don't want to flirt with the devil, right? You're not trying to position yourself in the right wild card spot to do any shenanigans and end up maybe playing the Pacific Division. But if it happens, maybe you feel like that path is a little bit easier for Colorado. If you end up in that wild card spot that plays in the Pacific, realistically, you're looking at probably Edmonton in round 1, maybe Vegas. I don't think LA can really get them. Well, maybe even, honestly, it's pretty undecided. The Pacific top of that division is pretty undecided. I don't know who you would end up playing on that side of the bracket. So hard to say, but safe to say there's a lot to decide, but you should feel pretty comfortable with the Avs being somewhere in the mix of the playoffs. We'll see. If you do go through that Pacific side, that does mean you wouldn't end up hitting Dallas until the conference finals, if that's who you're afraid of. I don't think the Avs should particularly be afraid of anyone this year, particularly with Dallas's defense. When you look at where their defense is with the Heiskanen injury and what they've done with that right side, it's just nowhere near as good as it was. Obviously, there's plenty of reason to feel confident against Winnipeg, given what happened in the playoffs last year. This Minnesota team is weird. I think they probably overperformed a good bit in the first portion of the regular season, and they've come down to earth a lot, which is why you see them, the Avs, within striking distance of them. We'll see. We'll see on that front. But my beard is actually going to go soon. It's not because of Landy or anything. It's just I wanted to grow it out for a while and see what it was like. So, if hobo aesthetic is my thing, we gotta give it a try. But it'll go soon. I've been talking about it for like a week or two now. I can only do it for so long, so we'll see. And yeah, of course, how the trade deadline shakes out, you'll feel maybe a significant amount different than you do right now about a number of teams. Colton for Mercer straight up. I don't know why they would do that. If they want to do it, I would do it in a heartbeat. But why would New Jersey do that, I guess, is my question. And I know Mercer's maybe not having the best year, but you have a young RFA player and you have Colton with 2 years left on a deal that takes him to UFA. I struggle to see New Jersey's interest in that. Anyway, a couple of other things. When it comes to Necas, when he first got here, McKinnon did an interview in the locker room saying how impressed he was with him and realizing just how fast he was. But yeah, another guy I wanted to talk about is Necas. We've talked a little bit. I'm open to either. I know E has really pushed for him to be on that second line because of how well Necas has helped drive play. or not E, more AJ. E kind of wants to keep them together, if I'm honest. Which, look, Mackinnon and Necas are obviously great together. If you want to keep them together, fine. I think they're so fast and so dangerous together that teams have to give them so much respect. It becomes a lot easier to possess pucks, especially to get zone entries, because now it's not just give the puck to Nathan MacKinnon and get out of the way. If Necas is coming up the ice, you have to respect that too. The other side of it is, yeah, the Avs, they need more spread production, right? Like, there's no doubt that the Avs need to do a better job of producing as a team, not just your top guys doing the heavy load. And Nate just dropping to the second line probably would help them produce, and certainly would help them drive play the right way better. When you look since the turn of January 1, and I know Nate just only joined about halfway through that, right? Nate just is your second most producing player when it comes to points per game since joining the Avs. Only Nathan MacKinnon has produced more points. So in that stretch of hockey, on a rate basis, he's even outproduced Mikko Rantanen. He's outproduced Cale Makar. He's outproduced guys like Jonathan Drouin. He is your second most effective point producer in Colorado since joining here. So if you need to boost that offense, I guess the question becomes this. How much do you think Necas is capable of being the guy on a line? Can he drive play by himself? Or does he need another super high-end player on his line to be as good as he is? Personally, I think he can do it himself, but I don't know that the Avs want to go with that option, especially when we talk about the other side of this break. Where's Val Nichushkin at? Is he going to be healthy? Where's the rest of the Avs forward core? What other options are they looking at? Because Val Nichushkin is also a very solid play driver that the Avs just have not had. Straight up have not had. He got injured on New Year's Eve, and he has not played since. So that's another significant piece that you have to fit into the puzzle of where does Necas fit in this lineup. I think it's probably fair to say, especially if you're wanting to run Drouin on the top line, you probably like Nichushkin up there as the defensive stalwart forward, which Drouin quietly is pretty decent defensively, but Val is obviously, he's never going to win a Selke because he's a winger, but he's one of the best defensive wingers in the NHL when he's playing. So if you want the defensive acumen, which I actually think Necas has been okay defensively too, but he's not a positive. He's just not Rantanen levels of defensively bad. If you are leaving Lehkonen on the top line, however, then things get more interesting. If you run a Lehkonen, Drouin, MacKinnon top line, a Necas, Nichushkin middle stat, or whoever your 2C is, makes a lot of sense in my opinion. So I struggle to see Lehkonen and Nichushkin together. That's the only thing that not that you couldn't do it, that line would be fine. But if you're trying to balance the defensive ability of that top six, I think you kind of have to separate Lehkonen and Nichushkin because those are your two most well-rounded, consistent forwards when it comes to the defensive side of the puck. And the interesting thing with that is maybe the Avs feel like they don't need that much defense because realistically, you have a bunch of shutdown options in your bottom six. Now, you're probably not getting enough production out of your bottom six, but especially with the addition of Jack Drury as a center, you're talking about Jack Drury. You're talking about Parker Kelly. You're talking about Logan O'Connor. Even someone like Kiviranta, who maybe is a little bit less effective, still solid defensively. That's four guys in your bottom six. You throw them together with Jack Drury at center, who's also great at faceoffs, and you're talking about shutdown options that the Avs have. Now, you end up getting a little bit lost at times because what do you do with a Miles Wood? What do you do with a Ross Colton who hasn't really produced to the caliber you've hoped over the last little bit of stretch? It gets hard to mix and match. But if you want to put a third line shutdown line together, you absolutely can. You can do that. The Avs even used it a little bit the other night against Edmonton and against McDavid, and it worked reasonably well. I don't know how consistent it can be. You can't really ask it to produce much for you, but it can probably shut some guys down. Anyway, we gotta take our second break here. So let's get into that as our main presenting sponsor for this show is Bet365. You can get with them. I hope you got some good bets the other day on the big game. Betting against the Chiefs. Come on, it's Denver. I told you. But whenever you sign up with Bet365, make sure you use code DNVR365 and you'll get $150 in bonus bets just for signing up and betting $5 on anything. Win or lose, those $150 will hit your account as bonus bets, and it's just free money to play with. You can bet on whatever you want. Doesn't even have to be hockey. It can be basketball. It can be other sports. You can be the Four Nations. That's going to start. You can bet on that too. So why not jump in with Bet365 today and get your bets in on whatever you're feeling with them. Obviously, tons of great ways to do it, whether it's the same game parlays or we often have DNVR specific custom bets that Dre does a great job with if you want to make some money. So hit them up at Bet365. Get with them today. And of course, when you do gamble with them, you must be 21 or older, physically located in Colorado. And if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER today. Once you got your bets in, that's when you kick back on the couch, relax, and open up an ice-cold Coors Light. Jump in with Coors Light today. It's the beer literally made to chill. The mountains turn blue on the bottle or the can to let you know it's ice cold. Absolutely delicious, right for any moment. You know you'll catch me drinking some in our takeover, or if you come down to the DNVR bar, you'll also catch me drinking some beers there during the Avs games. That beer is Coors Light. Super easy, super chill, and the coolest part is you don't have to go out and get it. If you want to get it right at home, they can get it delivered right to your front door thanks to CoorsLight.com/DNVR and Instacart. It's the easiest way to choose chill when it comes to Coors Light, and it's for every occasion, right? Whether you're having a dinner or you're watching the game, or maybe you're having a grill out in February with, I guess it's going to be cold soon. So maybe get that in now while we're getting the warm weather. But Coors Light is there to chill with you, whatever the occasion. Of course, when you do drink Coors Light, please drink responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. Third period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast. I would die to 150 Ducks for the record. They would kill me. That's what would happen. Look, the Avalanche lineup is obviously incomplete. That makes these kind of recap things hard because you know there's going to be changes. Realistically, you know the Avs need another C and another defenseman. You look at their lineup here, or their injury lineup, I should say. Nichushkin is a weird one. At first, he was going to miss 10 days. He's now been out for over a month. The last update we have is after the Four Nations break, but we don't actually know when that is supposed to be. Manson suffered a lower body injury. Look, I know there are a lot of people in the fan base that basically don't love Josh Manson's game. You kind of need that guy. Maybe he's more of a number 5 or a 6, and you feel like they need to go out and get another D ahead of him. Fair enough. But that's a guy who should be in your lineup every night. Wedgwood, not seriously injured. We expect him back legitimately after the break. So their goalie tandem, or whatever you want to call it, is perfectly fine. I had multiple people asking about Tucker Poolman. He was never expected to play. He was literally just an LTIR acquisition for the Avs to free up a little bit of cap space and allow them to pull off some shenanigans. That's all Tucker Poolman ever was. That was the whole point of that. Landeskog, the reality is there hasn't been any real updates there. I never want to say never. You could get back from this Four Nations thing and maybe he's a full participant in practice. I don't know. But what I will say is you're at the point in the season where the chances that Gabe Landeskog plays in the regular season now are 0. He will not play for the Avalanche in the regular season. He may play in the playoffs. I'm not going to say it's likely, but if you're looking at a timeline, that dude is not playing in the regular season for the Avs. And every day that goes by, my personal confidence that he's ever going to play again goes down. So I'm not hopeful. I'll put it to you that way with that situation. And then obviously Barron's with the knee. It's been out all season for the Eagles. So the injuries are legitimately crazy this year. And like, yes, that injury pile there isn't that bad. It's at least by Avalanche standards, that is not so bad. They've spent a lot of this season with ridiculous amount of injuries. If you get Nichushkin back, if you get Manson back, which they do expect to, you're as reasonably healthy as a hockey team can be, right? You're not going to get a lot better than that. So when you're looking at that full lineup, you at least have a good understanding of what the Avs need to go out and do for the trade deadline. Again, we did a pod last week that went extra long. Highly recommend you go check that one out if you haven't. We do a trade board of 20 people. We also talk about some honorable mentions that don't make it. So it's like 25 to 30 guys that we talk about for the trade deadline. If you have any questions on that front of it. Who do we think wins the Four Nations? We're actually probably going to talk about that more this week. My money's on Finland. I just think Finland is super sneaky good at international competition right now, but we'll talk about that a little bit more. Number one, no injuries. That's not just for the Avs. I mean, everyone who's going, no injuries. Please. That's all I care about, honestly, from the Four Nations. I'm sure some people are big on it, but to me, the Four Nations is a friendly tournament warm-up for the Olympics. That's all. That's all it is to me. I'm not putting much stock into it, clearly. So we'll see on that front. On the Avs, I did want to get back up to rounding up this last stretch of play for them. And I think this is important. In one, you need to get this guy some help at goal scoring. But two, the Avs' leading goal scorer since January 1st is Cale Makar, which is Cale Makar is a freak. He's the best defenseman on the planet. That dude is the best goal scoring defenseman I have ever personally gotten to watch. I truly, truly believe that. I've never watched a defenseman that's as good as scoring goals as Cale Makar was. Now, I was a little bit too young to watch Ray Bourque regularly. I watched his cup in Colorado, but that was at the end of his career. He wasn't quite that player anymore. There have been some other great seasons. You've had some great goal scorers, guys like Erik Karlsson, guys like Brent Burns. None of them are as good as goal scorers of Cale Makar. I truly, truly believe that. Except for Ray Bourque, but again, was too young. It's crazy. It's genuinely crazy what Cale Makar can do. He's that good. The problem is, no matter how good Cale Makar is, a defenseman should not be leading your team in goal scoring over any stretch that's more than a couple of games where he gets really hot. You need help there. Your next guy is Mackinnon with 9 goals since the turn of the new year, and then McKinnon at 7. And then the next guy is all the way down at 4 goals. You have a bunch of dudes at 4 goals. One of them is Necas, so hopefully there's some help there, right? He's played a lot less games than these other guys. Hopefully he's jumping in and helping those goal-scoring totals. But you need guys to produce a couple more goals. You need more goals from forwards out of this team. You'd love to see Jonathan Drouin put the puck in the back of the net a little bit more. He's actually produced very, very well. He's close to a point-per-game player, but he's just not scoring a ton of goals. And while he's never really been a goal scorer in his career, he did score 19 goals for the Avs last year. So on this team, he's proven he's capable of pushing that 20 goal scoring total. And the Avs need it, especially with the time that Val Nichushkin has missed, especially with the time that a bunch of their forwards have missed. The Avs need Drouin to score a little bit more. And the other big name that the Avs need to score more is Ross Colton. He's not going to score at the rate he did at the start of the season. Obviously, that was crazy where he was scoring every night, playing with McKinnon, playing on the power play. That was too much, but it has swung the other direction. Ross Colton, since the turn of the new year, has just 2 goals scored. That dude is too good of a goal scorer to go that long. He's shooting less than 6% since the turn of the new year. His career shooting percentage is 13. He's got to start putting the puck in the back of the net more. Absolutely has to for the Avalanche. They need him. Realistically, it's him and Juuso Parssinen that they're supposed to be the Avs' bottom 6 scorers right now. And you're not getting enough actual scoring out of those guys over the last stretch. The Avs have battled through it. Obviously, January was a bit up and down, but since February has come around, they've found ways to win. They've found ways to get production and do what they need to do. But you need more goal scoring. And I'm not saying it has to be outrageous, but it's got to be a little bit more consistent. If you score every, fourth night, every fourth game in the NHL, that makes you a 20-goal scorer. Realistically, I think that's what you need to expect out of Ross Colton. And Ross Colton's last goal, January 9th. So that's 3, 6, 9, 11, 12, 13, 14. Ross Colton, 14 games without scoring a goal. You're talking about Casey Middlestat levels of cold streak there. And we all know, justified or not, how poor Casey Middlestat's production was when he was cold. Casey's gotten it. It's gotten better. I'm not going to say it's where it needs to be, but it's gotten better. Casey isn't ice cold, but it's just not enough production out of Colton. So you do need a little bit more there. For the DNVR bar, we will be back in there. It's just been a weird stretch of schedule. Eric has been out of town, and my home setup makes more sense for call-ins. So that's what we've been doing of late. But after the Four Nations break, we will be back in the DNVR a lot more regularly. And when we do get to playoff time, we will be there for every game, even the away games. So just kind of figuring out schedule stuff right now. I know it's been a little bit weird, but no, we'll still be in the DNVR bar and we'll still be live and doing all of that stuff. So just letting you guys know on that front. We have a problem with the second line only getting limited ice time. Rudo, what do you think will change? You'll get Val Nichushkin back. I genuinely think that's the difference. Jared Bednar does not trust Juuso Parssinen, clearly. I don't think he trusts Casey Middlestat a whole lot right now either. And that shows in the time on ice. When we've seen these games where Middlestat and Parssinen are playing less than 10 minutes, he's still finding ways to get Jonathan Drouin ice time. Not a crazy amount. Jonathan's only playing like 14 minutes a night, but that's more than less than 10. And some of that is power play time, but some of that is also him finding extra shifts for Drouin with the top guys, whereas he's not finding that with Middlestat. I think especially in close games, Jared Bednar does not trust Parssinen and Middlestat, and he would trust them more if he had a safety blanket player like Val Nichushkin with them. So I think Nichushkin will unlock some of that. I think the Parssinen conversation is becoming a weird one, though. For a little bit there, it looked like Parssinen was really working on that second line, and you had something with him, Drouin, and Middlestat, but it didn't stick, and now that line is kind of lost. And while I do think Nichushkin will fix it, I don't know what you do with Parssinen, because you can't really leave him in your top six. I think you feel all of your other top six wing options are better. And if you don't trust him defensively, he's hard to play in your bottom six. Maybe you find a way to play Parssinen, Colton, and a different center, like you put Jack Drury with them as a defensive guy, and you find a way to get a little bit more offense out of your bottom six. Maybe that's the play, but I do think Parssinen becomes a tough fit if the Avs get a little bit healthier here. So, I don't have a great answer for what you do with Parssinen. I do think the second line will go back to getting regular minutes once Nichushkin is back in your lineup, though. So I don't know. The Avs depth does need to produce more. I don't know where that line is. Obviously, they're not going to produce multiple goals for you on the regular. It is what it is. I have some other questions to get to that were earlier in the show. Ezra said, my buddy is a Haan hater. Do you have thoughts on that? I don't understand the Haan hate. I don't think he was any good in the last game or two, but that was also coming off a lot of time off, and I don't know what you do with the Avs bottom pairing right now. Malinsky looked a lot better in the last couple of games. If you feel like he can come out of it a little bit, maybe you have an option there. But then you have Haan and Shillington and Middleton playing for another spot. In the regular season, it is what it is. I just don't see how you can play Middleton in the playoffs. You don't know what you have in Shillington because he's played, 9 games this year? Some of them have been disastrously bad. Some of them have been really good. You just don't know. The last one was not particularly good. Haan is certainly going to be more reliable defensively than someone like a Shillington and maybe even someone like a Malinsky. But realistically, especially if Malinsky gets it together and kind of takes over that 5th D spot or whatever you want to call it, you're probably talking about your 7th D here, right? You're probably going to go out and get a D. You probably call Haan your 7, maybe Shillington your 8, and depending on the matchup, if you feel like you need a more offensive D, you play Shillington. If you feel like you need the defense, you play Haan. And then Middleton is the enforcer type that only comes into games if you want to fight, essentially. So I'm not a Haan hater. I think there was a long stretch of the season where he was the best of the Avs bottom pairing D, but the reality of the Avs lineup, if Malinsky can get it together, is that he's probably on the outside looking in. Cujo says, are you a fan of Jordan Spence? Like he would be a perfect second pair right-handed D, and with Doughty already there, I doubt Clark would be okay with a third pairing role. Spence would be great. I would take a lot of options, but I just am not expecting availability, right? When you look at a team like LA, and maybe it's a little bit deceiving because LA has played the least amount of games in the NHL. So they're actually very much in the picture for battling for the top of the Pacific Division. Teams like that usually aren't trading guys, especially to direct competition when it comes to the playoffs. Unless the Avs are giving up a roster player that's better because LA wants to make their lineup better too. So I don't know that that's a realistic trade target, even if it would be a good option for the Avs. Kind of the same story as Sam Bennett in Florida, which we talked about earlier. So just not sure that it's realistic. Spencer asks, any concerns about Bednar's coaching beginning to fall on deaf ears simply due to the length of time on the bench? No, none. The idea that Bednar has lost the room is a completely fabricated thing that parts of this fan base have made up and have pushed because they yell it really loudly. It's completely untrue. The guys love Bednar. They love playing for him. He's the best coach in Avalanche history. There's no doubt about it. And he operates a system which the Avs perform extremely well in. He also operates a system which the front office understands how to work with. Martin Necas, that's a guy who fits Jared Bednar's system really, really well. They don't go out and get a guy like that if they don't believe in Bednar's system. I'm not saying he's perfect. There are absolutely problems I have with Bednar's coaching style at times. The usage of guys like Middleton, the weird thing where he never calls timeouts, the unwillingness to play that second line. Even if he doesn't like it, he needs to play it more than he has. He's not perfect, but the idea that he's lost the room is just completely untrue. The Dizzler asks, do you think Marty will stay on the first line? I already answered that one, actually. So my bad. Just reading through some of the other ones. Jamie saying, interesting that McFarland was at the last 2 Blue Jackets games before the break. I mean, maybe there's something interesting there. McFarland also has a lot of roots in Columbus. That's where he came from. He was working in their front office before he joined Colorado. So probably not actually that interesting. Probably just visiting old friends and things like that. Randy asks, out of the whole team roster, who do you think is trade bait? I mean, define trade bait, because the 2 guys that probably make the most sense, I'll say 3 guys that probably make the most sense for the Avs to trade. Miles Wood, I'm just not sure where he fits in the lineup anymore, and he hasn't been effective in that contract you would love to get out of. With that being said, all of those things mean he does not have a ton of value. 2, Sam Malinsky. And I know people aren't going to like that, but I think Sam Malinsky is the type of player where a team could see an interesting guy for cheap that they could get some term on. I think he would hold some value there if you find a team that believes in him and you have a various different number of other defensemen that can fill in the number 6 spot, especially if you go out and get another defenseman and Josh Manson gets healthy. The third one, and this one is a bit weird because there's issues there. Ross Colton has an NTC. He's also not played super well this year, but I think that's another guy where a team feels like if they could give him a little bit more opportunity, he might be able to succeed and would actually hold some value to some teams. If you're looking to get rid of a forward that might actually have some value, I think it's probably Ross Colton. Everyone else is either just not going to have very much value or is probably too integral to the Colorado's lineup to actively move a player. So I don't see a world where the Colorado Avalanche can trade Sam Girard. He's been too good, and Josh Manson's fall off. Again, I still think Josh Manson should be an everyday player on this team, but Sam Girard is the guy who's taken up the mantle of the third best D on this team by a wide margin. So it's more or less impossible for the Avs to trade Girard and get better from that trade. I'll put it to you that way. RC Cola says, with or without moves at the trade deadline, does this team realistically have a shot at the Cup? Without moves, no, I don't think so. I mean, if Landy comes back, are we calling that a move? Maybe if that's not a move, you could consider that to be a maybe Cup contender. I think as currently constructed with reasonable health, if everything goes great with the currently constructed lineup in full health, they might be a conference final team. If everything goes perfectly, they could maybe make the Final Four. Realistically, if they don't get better at the deadline, you're probably looking at another second round exit. So they have to get better at the deadline. If they make good moves at the deadline, they can absolutely be a Cup contender this year. They can absolutely win. And part of that is if Mackenzie Blackwood plays well, you've always got a chance. Ryan says, Rudo, my concern has been for a while now. The minutes the top guys put in every year, they look gassed by the end of the Dallas series, and I'm concerned about it again. Thoughts? They certainly did look gassed at the end of that Dallas series, but I mean, it's a factor. You can't play Cale Makar 29 minutes every night. That's ridiculous. You have to find a better way to do that. You can do that essentially in the last 10 games of the season, though. Look at what the Avs did in their Cup run. They were playing crazy big minutes that year, too. They had just secured their position at the top of the Central. And then in the last 10 games, they took it easy. They 100% took it easy and allowed those guys to recuperate going into the playoffs. That same thing may well play out this year. Now, it won't be for the top of the Central, but if the Avs have a wild card spot or the third seed locked up and no one's going to catch them, they could play a little bit easier through those last 10 games of the season. I'm not saying it's right or fair or whatever, but they could take some games off there and find a way to rest those guys. And I will say about the Dallas series, I know everyone likes to gloss over it, but more than physical exhaustion, I think the mental exhaustion played a factor of getting punched in the mouth during that series. Yeah, exactly, A-Wolf. I think that has had as much to do with them running out of gases as anything. So if that happens again, I mean, it just can't happen again. That's the point we're at with that situation. Yeah, I mean, I think the last two games, Malinsky was much better. The last two, which it's a 2-game sample size. That's not a lot. He's got to come back after the break. He's got about 2 weeks before the deadline to prove he's out of the slump and can be consistent. Is what it is. Drouin UFA after this year, what salary makes him retainable? In a world where Gabe Landeskog is not coming back, which I think is becoming more and more the reality, shouldn't be too hard to get Drouin done. Somewhere around $5 million probably would be my guess. Because he's worth the money. If he was healthy, you're talking about north of $6 million, but he hasn't been healthy this year. He has a track record of not being healthy, so you can't really commit that much money to him. But my guess would be between 5 and 6. All right. Is Blackwood going to be a Vezina contender in the upcoming years? Maybe. I based on what he's done in Colorado so far this year, I think he deserves votes. I really, really do. He's completely changed the trajectory of this team. Since joining Colorado, at worst, he's been a top 5 goalie in the NHL. So, can he win a Vezina? I don't know. I don't know if he quite has the ultimate super high ceiling to win a Vezina, but I think he can certainly get votes every year, especially with this team in front of him, because, regardless of how the team shakes out, you have Cale Makar and Devontae on that top pairing for the foreseeable future, and that helps your goalie a lot. So he should be effective for, goalies even tend to age slower, so I don't think it's unreasonable to expect him to be a quality goaltender in Colorado for the rest of that contract. Reports are Nelson has agreed to accept a short-term extension with the Islanders now. Before, he only wanted like a 5-year deal. Word is the Islanders have taken him off the trade market. Yeah, Lou does stuff like that all the time. I don't know. He is who he is. He does his own thing. He's a GM that certainly really likes his guys when he gets them, and that's fine. I know AJ is really high on Nelson. I think there are better options out there for Colorado. Even if I get it, like the injury risk with Yanni Gourde is a thing. There are other good forwards. Ryan O'Reilly, the more I've thought about it, I would like him more than Nelson. I think probably even like a Jake Evans I would have above Nelson on my personal board. So that one really does not bother me that much. Is what it is. Yeah. Lou is just not a rebuilder. He doesn't know how to do it. And certainly with someone like Patrick Waugh at the helm, he's not a rebuilder either. So they did that to themselves a little bit. Anyway, yeah. I don't know. This was a weird show. Thank you, chat. I appreciate y'all jumping in, asking questions, all that. We kind of had to audible as E had some IRL stuff come up today. But I hope I answered a bunch of your questions. I hope you guys enjoyed the show a little bit. We're going to be talking Four Nations a bunch either tomorrow or I guess tomorrow because the first games are on Wednesday. So yeah, we'll preview Four Nations and then who knows, maybe we'll talk about some of the Four Nations games on Wednesday. We'll see. Anyway, we are going to wrap up this show. Appreciate y'all. What's the most likely trade to happen 5 minutes after you sign off? Something super minor and irrelevant. Go get the new shirt, MVP City. Nathan MacKinnon, still the reigning MVP, by the way. So is Jokic. We appreciate y'all. Thank you for hanging out. We'll see you on the next one tomorrow, 2 p.m. Mountain. Until then, this has been the DNVR Avalanche Podcast presented by Bet365.
We all silly like the mayor.